Hi everyone and welcome to the third episode of the Dora Talks. Today with a new guest that I'm really excited about. Our new guest is Moritz von Kunow. Hi Moritz, happy to have you. And please give a short introduction about yourself, what you're doing and how you got in touch with Dora.
Yes, well, hello Leonard. Thank you very much for the invitation. And thank you for putting this really interesting topic on the table. I think there's a lot to say about this. Just to let people know what I generally do. And, I'm not entirely in tech. I just love it. What I generally do is I'm a non-executive on boards of operational AI firms, on fund boards. I work as an advisor, particularly in my old area of compliance and AML. Mm-hmm. And that's how I first got into touch with all the cybersecurity as well. And obviously, I'm also now researching on a topic. The name of the project is Aurela AI. Maybe we'll touch up on it later, but it's not Dora related. So let's keep that for later. Dora. I mean, in some way, I think in Luxembourg, for most entities in the financial space, it's a continuation of a trend which has already existed. I think I was more shocked when GDPR was introduced and Dora was introduced. I mean, clearly we're speaking about European directly applicable law in both cases. We've sort of seen how this works. And Dora will be implemented by the CSSF and not the CNPD. Mm-hmm. That's got to be different. But essentially, the way these things are implemented are fairly similar. And the CSSF has done a lot of work also to prepare at least some entities. I mean, I remember working for banks and also in the payments industry when the 2750, which is a CSSF circular, for those who are not in finance, was introduced. And I think this was a good preparation because you all had all the main elements of essentially creating a proper IT control function. Mm-hmm. So basically separating or maturing IT risk into its own type of risk. Essentially, when you have compliance and risk management, you very often think of financial risks. You thought of operational risk, where IT risk was previously always placed. It was part of operational risk, part of risk management, sometimes more in compliance, sometimes more in risk management. And it's now time to come into its own. So I think that's where we really see this on a European level with Dora.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, thanks. It's already a good, I think, way of moving into the direction that we want to talk about today. Maybe beforehand, for some of the people that always like to have different perspectives on a topic, how would you describe then for, let's say, a fairly young member of the community or somebody that is not in touch with Dora yet that much, of what Dora actually is and maybe the direct impact that you see also from a regulatory governance / legal perspective?
Yeah, I mean, legally, it's a regulation, so basically it applies to you. If you are inside the European Union or doing business with the European Union, you're concerned. Mm-hmm. Another, you just need to see whether you are truly concerned because you're in an industry which is directly targeted. Mm-hmm. But again, I think a lot of people are talking about the ripple effects of Dora. Mm-hmm. So even if you think you're not impacted because you don't find yourself on a list, mm-hmm. doesn't mean it will not affect you. Mm-hmm. There's a positive effect. I mean, I think we all realize that we all have our personal bank accounts, and we would very much like to keep the fiat money we have on our bank account and not have somebody take it away. And this, in part, is what Dora is about. Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't forget this aspect. Mm-hmm. Obviously, other aspects is it's about finance. It's about the operational entities in finance. I think for Luxembourg, it's important to realize that what we generally refer to as professionals of the financial sector, so that do not have a specified license. These licenses are very Luxembourgish licenses as such. They're not directly in the scope of Dora, but think of it. If you're in a PSF and you're offering IT services, the likelihood of not being touched is very close to zero. And then if you're not touched, and you will not directly be touched. I just take an example, from my day-to-day work. Sitting on a board of an investment fund, well, you do ask yourself whether your service providers are ready for Dora. I mean, it's high time. The date has been known for a while. It's not a surprise. I know that Christmas is always a surprise for many. Although it's fairly recurrent. I mean, this is sort of a one-off to get started. So you may have missed that. But it's clearly a date in the calendar. And, for most people, it's not that far. When I mentioned the payments industry and banks where I was in with the Circular 27750, it's sort of, you were already fairly well prepared, and that's a few years back. I mean, 20 basically says 2020. I think it was applicable sometime in 21. We're now at 24. So the basic infrastructure is already there. There are certain recurrent things. Also, when you come to the daily doings you need to do under Dora, you need to know who you're working with, where your data is, who is processing it. Well, these are all questions most people at least should have asked themselves for GDPR.
Sure.
There are a lot of also other links. Robust IT systems have been basically in finance ever since, I think, it was even a MiFID at the time. What you need to do when you have all these abbreviations, everything, you need to realize that they're targeting something else. They're there for a different purpose. So one is protecting the data of natural persons. The other one, basically the cyber resilience of, which is Dora GDPR. I don't think I need to mention that again. But the cyber resilience of an entity, which is very important because it's financial. And I think there it's also important to see that there are also other things which could be very important. Our infrastructure mainly relies on things which are connected with the internet, a connected world. For the rest of the connected world, we have the upgrade of NIS 1 to NIS 2, which is very interesting because NIS, in versions 1 and version 2, which is also quite interesting from a legalistic perspective, the choice was to rest with a directive. How does a directive work in comparison to a regulation? The regulation concerns you directly, as a company, as an individual, whereas the directive is transposed into a law. The date for NIS 2 implementation on European level just passed 2 or 3 days ago. As far as I could see, Luxembourg Parliament should more or less be ready to pass the law. It's still a draft, at least it was this morning.
Okay.
Let's see. I didn't check whether it's whether it's on the list of Parliament today, but it will come. Interestingly, also, when you look at the relationship of the two, because you could ask yourself, okay, this is all same but different. Well, yes and no. I mean, first of all, targets, well, put it that way, NIS 2 also targets the financial sector. They're responsible, you have the ILR for the rest of other entities, but for the financial sector, the implementation, like NIS 1, there's no change. The CSF is also responsible for the enforcement of the law, which will be based on, we don't have a date yet, so I can't tell you what it will be called. But this will be implemented by the CSSF as well. And when you look at the relationship of the two, you have one which is a regulation, and that is not for interpretation on a national level as such. Well, yes, I mean lower, but you can't go against it. Whereas the NIS, or it should be called NIST, because it's a directive, as much as Dora should be called Dora, but Dor with a double R, it doesn't really sound that good. To differentiate the two. And this will be interpreted in a national way. We already know, I mean, we've seen the drafts. It's not going to be hugely different from what we've seen in the drafts, maybe extra definitions. But you see, if there are things which may not be regulated in Dora, but which could be regulated in NIS 2, and NIS 2 applies to you, it's not exactly the same. It doesn't exactly apply to every single entity. I don't think we should go into details. At least we don't have the time for that. There could be extra rules which could come in, which come from NIS 2, which may not be directly in Dora. as well as, obviously, for the financial sector, there are stricter rules, which will come from Dora, which others that simply have to adhere to NIS2 will not need to adhere to, or indirectly, to the national law, which is a bit of a pity, really, I find, because particularly in the space of internet and IT, we live in a more globalized world. So personally, and this is very personal, I think a NISR, so a regulation NIS, would probably have been better for a common market in a way.
Okay.
But there we go. Two versions of a directive.
Yeah.
Dora as a regulation. But at least we've got it there. So we've got a common playing field in Europe when it comes to cybersecurity and finance, which is
Good thing. Yeah.
already a very good thing. I mean, we have to think of the two sides. Your own bank account and what you do professionally. You may have sort of 2 hours beating your breast, but I think it's sometimes good just to lean back and think of what it does to people and how to reassure them.
Picking up on that, because I think it's very interesting what you said, and also the exposure that you have in the market due to your profession. So as you said, NIS kind of prepared the market to some degree of what Dora is then actually going to have, let's say, demanding from them. Obviously, being then legislation is kind of a game changer in that sense, but also a twofold question here. So what can they learn already from the existing directives and regulations they already put in place? And also more in general, seeing that the CSSF just released their readiness survey of the market, specifically on AFMs, MACOs, banks. It's maybe just a personal interpretation from your side there. I think the 4 main priorities they had was also contractual negotiations, obviously, then also the group levels that are affecting basically decision making here, and the lack of resources as the top 3. But yeah, twofold question in one sense. How can some of the problems that are coming up right now as the result of the CSSF survey also be solved with, let's say, some best practices already present through GDPR and NIS2? And then later on, but it's in a separate question, how tech can also help in this. But first of all, these two, maybe your own opinion on that.
Yeah, well, I saw the survey, and if I remember correctly, you saw much more readiness, say, in banks and payments, which for me is a direct result of the implementation of the 2750 circular of the CSSF, because asset managers at the time were not concerned. This was sort of new. I think for them, the big tech question came in with, usually they do delegation and now they do outsourcing. And okay, let's leave the numbers aside. I think this is only for insiders to talk in abbreviations. But the big IT outsourcing circular they brought out, which then also incorporated all the others. Because let's not forget, very often IT is about things you don't necessarily, as a player in the financial sector, necessarily do yourself, but you have others do it for you, but you remain responsible. I think that's the shortest definition of outsourcing in a way. And yes, I think it's a great challenge. The challenge is sort of different depending on what you've been doing previously. Also, how concerned you've been with implementing previous rules. I think this is very important. But for those who haven't woken up to it yet, still thinking that maybe paper support would be a good way of monitoring, or even spreadsheets. I mean, spreadsheets was a great invention of the late 70s. And it was great. It's still great. And one of the market leaders, you can even use Python now to code into their version of spreadsheet. Try to avoid brand names. But this is quite cool. You can do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I think you really need to get to technology solutions in order to confront these, for several reasons. I mean, what you also sort of mentioned, we don't have enough qualified people to do the job. As simple as that. It's complex. But some of the complexity, particularly when you look at the implementation of European regulations, is fairly granular. And when you think of granular, I always start thinking, well, I've heard of a way of processing a lot of information which is fairly certain. Now, I think we're all talking of ICT in a way, but but there's loads of it.
All right.
Okay, that's sort of got a heartbeat slightly up. But it also shows what technology can do for us. We just received this test alert, and that's cool. It was automated. I think this is probably, this is the key word. I think it's more of a key word than anything else. Mm-hmm. We have a shortage of people, particularly of qualified people. Mm-hmm. We need to get a lot of things done. And I think this is where maybe we broke off as well. Because, see, the thing is, the more granular regulation becomes, and the more precise it becomes, the less interpretation you need, the less, and I am a lawyer by training, the less argumentation you can put into this, but the more it is clear. But it's just becoming huge by mass. We all know basically one thing which works really well, and that's basically IT. I mean, this is the way you can really break down complex data, where you can process it, where you get the right results. You don't forget anything of the 1,250 different options, whereas humans are better deciding between two and filling in the gray area between the two. I think this is quite important to realize, and this is where it comes into its own, and where Dora is sort of nearly perverse in its effect, because basically you're using to control what Dora is telling you to control. So basically, you're using cybersecurity to implement cybersecurity regulations into your own systems. And this is quite interesting, but I think, time's gone by with spreadsheets, etc. We need to go into a new era.
Yes.
We need to think about new ways of doing it. Also to liberate the people we have to do, to add value when they're working. And this is really, really important. And there are obviously many solutions. I mean, just looking at someone who may have something which could help. Yeah. But we won't put in the banner. I mean, no, there will be a banner anyway. I think these are really important things to think about. And the real catchword is actually automation, because you talk about a lot of new technologies coming in and things that could theoretically bring you forward, but the only thing that really replaces someone having to look at it is that you receive a reliable automated result of a process. Sure. Anything else, maybe a help. I mean, obviously we all work with Copilot, but I mean, fun fact, today I just sort of asked Copilot, look, is it really true that GDPR and Dora, how do they calculate fines? Are they sort of really close or not? And somehow it struck me that one talked of turnover globally and the other one talked of, I can't remember, something else. I said, no, this can't really be true. And then I had to go to the good old beloved search engine to simply have a look at the articles in both. And, it's not perfect yet.
Yeah. No, but I couldn't agree more. I think especially Dora brings forward basically what you also said, that the technology being used to handle some of these problems now is just to a certain degree outdated, and you actually need to perform now way more oversight. You need to perform way more data collection, automation, and also harmonization, right? So it's also a big thing that we see when we talk to people, especially also about the register solution, that you have to, first of all, collect data. If you're now like a large enterprise and you have multiple ICT providers from which you need tons of data basically that you don't necessarily have, and you need to cooperate with them, then you have to bring them into the right format. And Dora is also very strict on how to then really set them in a harmonized and connected way into the actual template, right? So I think there's just so many difficulties. And now we're talking also about a date. We have a clear date. What I heard, apparently it's going to be the same error message on the 17th of January on our phones. I'm joking, but it would be hilarious. But yeah, clearly a date is inside and not too long ago. So I think also now a topic is time to value and time to compliance, right? So a lot of people might have the reflex to say, well, I'm already paying someone that is kind of our Excel master and wizard, and he might be able to do some automations within the spreadsheets and he can take care of Dora. But I think now people that are more and more in touch with it, but that's also something I would like to ask you, just it becomes apparent, no, that it's not handleable anymore in this level of connectivity and also in relation to other regulations to all just bring it back to one place. I think so tech is in some way inevitable, or at least can really take away this this problematic of not being compliant to a certain date. So maybe in your terms as well, as you said, automation plays a role. Beyond this, what you see as like actual business values of just implementing this, and also given the date, which is very closing in. Is it compliance? Yeah. What is?
I think, and this is quite interesting how you put it. I think tech and really upgrading is inevitable if you want to have a profitable business after that date. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. There's no way. I mean, theoretically, you could just employ, armies of people doing things. They wouldn't be doing anything else, but with the current margins we have in finance, this would not leave you, it would leave you something with a loss. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's nothing which could be called sustainable in a business sense. So there is no other way. Mm-hmm. You need to go for that. You need to go into that direction. Mm-hmm. You need to really go also into the modern ways of interpreting and going away from spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. Although, as said, I'm excited about being able to put Python finally into my favorite spreadsheets, but that's not a solution. The solution is really to go a little further. You've got so many data points. Mm-hmm. You also have data points who do different things. Some are data, but some data you actually need to make work, because essentially, like the Dora regulation we download, not only in PDF, because the European Union also has everything in HTML, so it is very much processable. But this is also a data point, but this is a data point which actually processes the rest of the data, or tells you how to do it. So there are a lot of things you need to connect, and I think there you just need to upgrade if you want to continue doing what you're doing, because essentially the money you're making is still in finance, it's not in IT. But you need it, it's an enabler, and this enablement is just the only way forward. I mean, to give you another anecdote, and this will be the last one, currently working on a research project. As I said, we call it Aurelia AI. You can look it up on LinkedIn. It's about automating a full process of, in the space of AML, and it's not related to this here, but it sort of demonstrates how important it is to fully automate a process. So basically the idea is that you can be told what your text in your current policy should look like in order to adhere to the next generation of rules. And you don't need anyone in between to tell you, no, it could be right, it shouldn't be. Or like for me this morning, I'm not so sure, I think you got it wrong. No, it needs to be reliable. And this is what maybe on the tech side we need to work on. On the other side, there's no way to work without tech. So basically, there's homework for everyone. But it's really exciting. I think we're really getting into a new era of finance in the sense that what has been there for a while in fintech and some large players who've woken up very early is now trickling down into the entire industry. Because I think more and more people are realizing that there is no way around it and it's necessary, but it's also, it could do really cool things for you.
Absolutely.
And it's an enabler. You can go further than before. And I think this is the real message. Not always stay negative on this. It's cool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, also what we see is what people want in the end is just that tech takes away a lot of the headaches that they might have, and also a lot of the resource shortage that is just simply, as you said, the biggest problem maybe in Luxembourg, also for the future, especially given the margin that is changing that much. But this is just something that we also see when we actually display or talk about the solution actually, right? You have 2 months, just put something in place that has helped you from day one and basically just go on with your business, right? I mean, regulation is important to implement, and I also think that Dora has a nice long-term effect on some of these players, right? So maybe I had I had a presentation last week during the LPA with Janusz from Kastik, who said, well, it has positive impact on fundraising quite clearly, right? So there's like multiple positives also on Dora. But you want to have something that just complements your business and doesn't hold up for a certain time, but you just want to go on with business and just take care of this by using tech. And as you said, we're approaching a time in finance where AI is playing an even bigger role. Copilot is what I would say like only a considerable action point for the moment, but if you expand it, it can be tremendous, especially for Luxembourg, given the shortage of workforce that we have. So efficiency, productivity gain, all of these topics are actually what tech can enable you to do. And so I think going into Dora or let's say AML automation is just a good case to start off with, because those are like handable, actual graspable regulations that just need to be in place and just show the power that it can have and expand from there on. So I don't know if you see it the same way, especially given your project that you have on, is the willingness there from the market? Does it just has to be forced now because regulation comes? Or do you think it's going to be a natural decision-making process at this point because it's just too much to handle at this point?
I think it's really the last point you made. It's a natural process because you can't handle otherwise, which is maybe unfortunately also for some a natural selection process. If you don't go that direction, there is no alternative to that. It's not that you can have a business which doesn't embrace it, which is why it's all the more important that you have something like Dora to say, yeah, but if you're doing it, you need to do it in a way which is safe, because that's basically, Dora in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And this whole thing is actually, it's an immense opportunity for finance. Yeah. It is where we need to go, and to take along everyone. Maybe some people would not have got the message before. Now it may be a false message for some. For some others, it's just putting things right again or reusing data. Because for those who are already prepared, I think the real reflection should be, okay, what have I been doing previously? How can I reuse the work I've already done? Where to put it? It's probably, you will see that some of the lists you've already done for GDPR will be very similar for Dora. The way you need to manage contracts, we all saw the declarations with virtually any contract we have on data protection, no way around it. Will this be the same for Dora? I don't think so, because it will sort of affect the whole thing differently. Hopefully, it will be more intelligent. With the right systems, such as the one you're developing and maybe the research project I'm working on, there's some points you have a system which basically tells you, well, look, if you enter into a contract with this one, seeing the articles in Dora with maybe the RTS that follow, whatever, this is what should be in there. I don't see it in your contract. Put it in there, and then you go to an automated exchange, because obviously if you have an article, I want to do due deal on whatever, once a year, well, then I have a system that reminds you, hey, you need to do your due deal. And maybe you also have an automated due deal. Why not? I mean, let's just go further and maybe dream a little also what we can do in future.
Absolutely. I think just to go full circle, also back to what we said at the beginning and the results of the CSSF, why are banks the group that is basically the best prepared? Because they actually were forced, at some degree, to implement during other regulations, but they are in a good point now. So I think Dora is not really shocking them as much as maybe the AFM and micro business, right? So I think it's also a good example that you brought to say, listen, it's worth it. And I don't think we're going to go less on cybersecurity in the future, for sure not. Connectivity is going to grow. The more adoption you have on systems, also based on AI and models, the more important it is that you have a resilient strategy, right? So.
Totally. I mean, in the olden days, we were most worried that the Dalton brothers would come with a donkey cart to take the safe away from the bank, which is something we don't worry about anymore. But there are modern Dalton brothers out there which are after our money as well. I mean, that's the element which hasn't changed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. I think there's a lot inside here. It was very, very interesting to talk about it. So thanks a lot for coming. Really appreciate your response. So maybe also to engage a bit with the people that might have questions in the comments, we would be happy maybe if they could ask something and reach out. And I don't know if you have any last words related to Dora, positive message that you would like to send also to the market, and how do you would like to close?
For me, I think as short as I can, go for it. Embrace it.
Yeah. Just do it. So thanks a lot, Moritz. It was really an absolute pleasure. Hope to do this again anytime soon. And then thanks for coming by to Loft. Cheers.
Thank you for having me, Leonard.
Thanks.
Thank you.